different learning items which are in the respective provider into Learning Cloud. That is what will ensure employees can view those learning items in Learning Cloud itself without explicitly navigating to that respective provider. So for doing that import, there are two different steps. Firstly, you should run a batch process, load and synchronize external course data. That process will load the available items from that respective external provider into Learning Cloud, but it is not directly available to the employees at this stage. Because when it loads into Learning Cloud, it will load it into kind of a staging area to make them available for final import. Fine. So this batch process you can schedule also. You can schedule to run daily so that any new items that are available in that provider at a later time, those also will get imported to Learning Cloud continuously, regularly. So once that is done, once you run that import process, where you will be able to find those learning items which are made available for final import. For that, you have this import external content. So here you will find the output of that particular batch process. Only this LinkedIn is enabled, as we saw in the other setup page also. That's why here in the provider, you see only LinkedIn. And to import entire catalog also, you have this only one that is enabled. Right. So these are all the different learning items that are there in this particular provider, fetched by this integration using that batch process. Right. The advantage of having these in this staging area is so that admins can control which items they want to make it available in Learning Cloud. Without this staging area, if you run that batch process, every item will be made available, which may not be required for some customers, right? They may want to decide which ones to make available, which ones not. Right, so this way they have total control which items they want to next import it and then make it finally available for the employees. So as of now, you see the import status is not imported. It is still in this staging area kind of only. And here admin can select one or more items and then click on import. So it shows this information about you are about to create or modify a course, because how can these learning items be made available in Learning Cloud? By doing the same configurations that we saw. But this integration will ensure the system will do those configurations for you. For these respective items, system will create a course offering and all those as required. Fine, so that is what we want to achieve anyway. So let's continue. All right, so let's wait few seconds for the batch process to complete. So for these 4 items, you saw the status got reflected now. It shows import requested. That is what we have done, requested to import. And after they are imported, once we refresh after a few more seconds, it should show the result. All right, it's still the same status. So let's maybe utilize this time for Q&A if any questions. All right, so no questions. Hopefully all good, everyone. Fine. So now if it has completed successfully, that is the import date, 17th, right? And status is current. We just imported it and it is showing the import success, the correct expected status. And now to see these different items, we can navigate to the respective pages, which on Monday in the content and in the catalog pages like this learning, screenwriting, responsive design, mixing. So these are all the items we have just selected, right? So let's see these in our catalog resources in content. Yeah, these first 4 are exactly what we have imported. right? So created by this person with which we logged in as Curtis Fetty on this date and time, right? That is just showing in a different time zone, not in APAC time zone. I think some US time zone is the preferred time zone for this particular user. So that's why the time was a little bit different. All right, so that's the result. And also we can navigate to those other pages like this catalog and see that course offering would have got created here also, right? So for one item, here is the offering and this is the course that got created. Similarly, for the next item, responsive design was the other one, course and offering both got created. So you have all these 8 items that got created for the 4 items that we imported. For each one course and one offering. Fine. So that's the advantage of this integration. You didn't have to configure all these things. The system has considered these details that are there in the respective provider and use that to do all these configurations. So this is not just a placeholder, even all these details like syllabus and all also is automatically configured here. Right. So similarly, when you go to offering, you can see that offering that we saw in the search page also. As of now, no active learners are completed as expected because this is just a new one we created. Right. And offering format also as expected. This is self-paced because it is backed by content that employee has to go through. Right. So here also you have all these different details, including description, it configured. Right. And then when you go to the activities, one activity it created and that is mandatory to complete. And in this activity, it would have linked the item that we saw in the content. So here also it considers all these descriptions and all that it fetched from that respective item in that respective provider. And this is the content that it has linked. This content we saw in the content resources page, right? And then once this is done, if you want to change access and all such additional functionality we discussed, all that you can do also. Instead of no access, you may change it to details view, summary view as per the requirement for this particular learning item. It defaulted no access because in the setup page, in the default page we saw yesterday, we had set it to no access. Fine. So all those other functionalities remain the same. Advantage of this integration is to create these items automatically and make these available to the employees from within one self-service from within Learning Cloud itself. All right. So this is how you can integrate with the third-party content providers. Because these providers have content in their respective platforms or learning management systems. And then another category of third-party providers is for your virtual classroom support. So these are the out-of-the-box integrations you have with these providers, Zoom and others. You already know all these platforms as you would for virtual instructor-led training, like how we are using Zoom currently, right? How all of us are connected with a meeting ID, password, URL kind of details. Earlier, WebEx also was supported, but since few quarters that is deprecated now, that is no longer available. Fine. So this integration with these virtual classroom providers will avoid manual additional steps for the administrator for instructor-led activities. Because without such integration, imagine what will be the process flow when admin creates instructor-led activity in Learning Cloud. How do they provide the URL? Like on Monday, I showed ad hoc URL you can provide that zoom.us. They will be able to provide after they create that respective event or meeting or webinar, whatever it may be called in that respective system, and then get that link from that system, copy paste into Learning Cloud. That's the process flow without this integration. But this integration will ensure such manual additional steps will not be required, because system will directly create meetings in that respective provider in Zoom or Teams or so. By sending the details of the instructor-led activities that learning admin creates in Learning Cloud, the details required are date, time, and other such details that will be sent by the system when you run or schedule a batch process. And also it will update that link in Learning Cloud. The link will be also made available to employees in self-service. In addition to that, you also get functionality like attendance reports will be made available in Learning Cloud. So how does all this back and forth happen between these two systems, between Learning Cloud or any of these systems that you integrate with? With a batch process, you have to schedule, which is sync instructor-led training for learning. And recommendation for this batch process is to run every hour. Because this will sync multiple records, multiple learning records, multiple activities. The volume could be more. If you run it less frequently, it may take time. Also, this will ensure that the link is made available to employees in self-service. Self-service enrollments can keep happening throughout the day. Multiple enrollments can happen in a short while also. So recommendation is to schedule it once every hour. All right, so let's see how you can configure this, how you can enable this integration. That is same as what we saw for the content providers also. The same page, external providers. Here you see this 3 different providers, right? Create new one, agree to these terms, and then these details are pretty much the details you have to ask the customer and copy paste here. Provider URL, username, and password. And this account name can be user friendly. You can have your naming convention, right? And same way you can validate it. Once the validation is successful, you can save it, and then it will show that row there in that same page. And then that you can use in the further setups. Right. So for this integration, the way to associate to a instructor-led activity is by first associating to a instructor record. Because in instructor-led activity, you will be adding the instructor. So prior to that, associate this integration with the instructor record. So when you create these instructor records, like we saw on Monday, so here let's wait for it to load this. All right, so let's consider this one where it says that is null. Here is where in the last section in virtual accounts, you can add that integration that you enable there. So it is not showing the provider name and it is showing status inactive because it was for a deprecated integration. Like WebEx was supported earlier, WebEx is deprecated. But once an active provider is there, you will be able to select it. All right, you will be able to select provider and the account name. Account name is what we have configured, and the username, the respective admin name that you use there. After that, it will show like this in active status once it is active. And once this is done, when you go to create an instructor-led activity, so now back to our catalog, and let's consider a instructor-led offering or blended offering there. So this one we created for instructor-led type of offering demo, right? So here when you create an activity next, right? So here remember, when you don't have this integration, I mentioned on Monday, you can use this ad hoc virtual classroom, type the URL here. But the advantage of this integration is you will be able to use named virtual classroom. And then that named virtual classroom, you will be able to select it here once you associate the right instructor here who has that classroom associated to them already. So based on this virtual classroom that you select, the batch process that you will schedule every hour will send this activity detail to the respective provider to create event or webinar, whatever it may be called in that system, with these details. Right. So whenever that particular batch process runs next, it will pick up all such activities which were created after the earlier run of the batch process to set up these things. Fine. And once that is created, that URL will also be made available to the employees in self-service. These are the delivered out-of-the-box integrations you have with different third-party providers as of now. This list keeps expanding. Few releases back, we had only a few of these content providers. Lately, we had a few more. All the details you can find in readiness documentation, last few slides also, which providers we just added recently. Right. So if your customer is interested in some other content provider, you can still ask the development team if that integration is in the plans or so, because we do have plans to continuously expand this list. Related to this external providers integration functionality is a new subscription or kind of license called Learning Connect that customers have to get only if they want to integrate with more than one provider in each category. So if they want to integrate with one of the providers in each category, no need to get the additional license. If they want to integrate with Zoom and LinkedIn Learning, one each in each of the categories, that additional subscription is not required, because one in each category is covered in the default license for Learning Cloud. But if they want to integrate with more than one provider in a category, then they have to get this additional license. So this additional license, we announced it almost 2 years back, because that is when we started increasing this list of different providers, because each of these providers requires quite some development time, right? So the base Learning Cloud license that includes all the other functionalities we discussed so far includes any one virtual type of connection and one content type of connection also. But for more than that, they'll have to get the additional license, which will include also these additional upcoming features. So not just the few that you saw in the prior slide, there are a lot more integrations being planned related to payments functionality and also for attendance management. So all those planned for future, customers get all those integrations also with this additional license. All right, and depending on whichever integration your customer is interested in, like I said, you can go through those additional documents also I provided in the last few slides, where there is a link to a playbook also. That playbook has multiple integration steps documented. So even without looking at the instance, you will know some of the terminologies, like whether it is client ID, client secret, and all such as well. But the overall flow remains the same. The different steps that I mentioned will still be applicable. All right, and then this next use case, the last use case in the core functionality of Learning Cloud. After this, we will have use cases leveraging the common functionalities, like I said. So like in other modules also, you would have seen AI agents, like in benefits, absence, OHR, recruiting, and so on. Here also, these different AI agents are mainly to reduce the manual administrative tasks for the learning specialists. Right, to simplify their work, these agents can be leveraged, which generate those respective things in each of these agents, generate the required content for these respective areas, so that administrator doesn't have to start from scratch. They will be able to review what the agent has generated and decide if that is okay, or do some changes if required, and then finalize it. right? So first such agent is learning skills enrichment agent, which will generate learning outcomes for courses and specializations. Remember in learning outcomes use case, you saw yesterday how learning outcomes can be added to the courses and also to specializations. You can add the same way, right? One of the outcomes can be new skills that employee acquired at the successful completion of the training. If it is a learning cloud course, at the successful completion of it, they will earn the skill of learning cloud consultant. So that you can add as a learning outcome manually, like we have seen yesterday. But instead of adding it manually, agent can help the learning admin generate the recommended skills as learning outcomes. For this, firstly, two prerequisites, because this is all about skills, and you know dynamic skills is the recommended functionality for that. So you should implement dynamic skills, which is part of your talent management. So that is the first prerequisite outside Learning Cloud, which you have to take care. And then the second prerequisite is within Learning Cloud, that is for the different courses and specializations, the different fields, the general information fields like title, syllabus, description, these should be available. Because how does the agent generate the recommended skills? There should be some starting point for the agent. It will consider the keywords that you entered in those fields, title, syllabus, and description fields. Using those keywords, it will search what are the relevant skills that are available in dynamic skills and then suggest or generate the relevant learning outcomes. Fine, so let's see this in instance. All these different AI agents and also few more applicable in other modules you will find here within the HCM agent section. Right, so learning skills enrichment. This is the one which generates that outcomes, like I said. Right, so here you will be able to add different agents, though you started with learning skills enrichment. Just that the default filter it applies is this learning skills, but you can change the filter also. So learning catalog translation also you can choose. Just that whatever is the agent you chose in the landing page, that will be the default filter. So if you choose a different one, learning catalog translation, it will still open the same page, learning agents, just the category is defaulted to this one. And if you want to configure new, you can configure any of those new ones. Right, so here for our current use case related to skills enrichment, right, so here let's see this existing one, or maybe let's add a new one, learning skills enrichment. All these name, description and all pretty self-explanatory fields, right? So because you started with that particular agent, the category is set to that particular agent. This you can't change. If you want to create a different one, you can go back to add and choose a different AI agent. Fine. And then here, what are the different things that you can control in this AI agent? Just like how you set the input parameters for a batch process, right? That's the kind of functionality you have where you can provide these different parameters, right? One such is, what is the list of items for which you want to generate these skills? Because you may not want to generate for all the items in the instance. You may want to generate for few courses, push specializations and so on. How do you control that? Is using filtered list. Right, you must be familiar with this filtered list in other modules also. This is also a common HCM functionality across modules. But even otherwise, the name itself gives an indication, right? Filtered list is just a list of items filtered with some criteria. So somewhat similar to eligibility profiles, but eligibility profiles is to filter only the workers, only the people. But the filtered list can be used to filter different type of objects. So using this, you can filter the learning items also. Right, so you can see this functionality in manage filtered list. So what are the different type of objects you can filter? You can use this to filter workers, learning items, and so on. When you add this new list, fine, firstly you have to choose what is the object on which you want to create filter, which object you want to filter. Is it workers, right? Or is it learning items? This learning items is the one relevant for our current use case, because we want to give a filtered list of learning items to tell the agent generate skills only for these learning items. So for that purpose, you can choose this, but other functionalities also where it is used, you will be able to know with these different objects here. And then you have to choose the subscriber also, where you intend to use this particular list. You want to use it in this particular agent. And then here goes the actual criteria configuration. Here you can add the different conditions so that you get only this relevant objects as required. So let's say you want to restrict it based on this delivery mode, right? What are the different delivery modes, also called as offering types or learning formats that we understood? If you want to restrict it only for the instructor led, let's say, you can use this criteria and also add more criteria if you want. Fine, here it says includes people that match all these conditions. It's not always people. This people word is applicable when you choose workers here. But in filtered list, you can filter other items also. So now it is including learning items that match all these conditions. And one good functionality related to this filtered list, especially when compared to eligibility profile, is you can see the output in preview immediately here. All this functionality is not there in eligibility profile, right? But here you have all that features also, so that instead of waiting till the actual use case testing, you'll be able to validate right now during the configuration part. Fine, so that's how you can use this filtered list to limit the criteria on which AI agent will generate these skills. And one such filtered list available is this that you can choose. Fine. And before we discuss this, other configuration options you have, which help you to curate skills more efficiently, let's understand how this agent will work. Then it will be easy to map those to these different configurable options. So when the AI will generate or suggest the skills, each skill is assigned a confidence score based on relevancy of the skill to that particular learning item. The confidence score will range from 0 to 100. The higher the relevancy, higher the confidence score. Because that confidence score you would have heard in other AI functionalities also, right? Depending on how probable that is the right one, the confidence score can range from 0% to 100% or 0 to 1 or so, depending on however it is designed. Here it is in terms of percentage. So here you can set the different confidence score thresholds for skills that need to be reviewed and for skills that should be auto approved. Right? Because if the confidence score is high, you may want it to auto approve without having the administrator to review. So in this automatically approve if score is more than, you can set some higher threshold like 80, 95 or so. And for the skills that have scored below this value, but above some particular reasonable threshold like 60%, 70% or so, if you want administrator to review those, that second threshold you can set here. Fine. So the skills more than this score, more than 60, but less than 90, will be added to the Excel, but they will be in pending review status, need review status. And any skills that are generated with less than this 60% confidence will not be added to the Excel at all for review. So that administrator do not have to go through a bigger list of items just because AI has generated it. If there is so many more items they have to go through with low score, that may even defeat the purpose of AI generating. Whatever is AI generating, admin will lose the time by reviewing a bigger set of items that you should avoid by setting a reasonable score here in the pending review status also. And also to ensure admin does not get unreasonably high number of skills to review, you can set what is the total number of skills to be suggested, right? And this 20 will be applicable for both these confidence scores. So it will generate 20 skills which are higher than confidence 60, which includes the ones which are higher than confidence score of 90. Yeah, as here also it indicates, this is applicable for skills in both these categories. Fine, and then apply and then run the agent. Just select this and run agent. And once this successfully completes, it will show a Excel which you can download that will have list of learning items that are in scope as per the input parameter you have given. And for each of those, what are the skills suggested by this AI agent? In that Excel, admin can review each one, whichever are marked for review, the ones with confidence score above 60 but less than 90 or 95 that we configured, and then decide whether they have to accept them or not. So they can change the column to yes to accept and then click on upload to upload those for the respective courses and specializations. And those of you using Windows laptops, you can practice this also in your instance. For those on Mac like me, I will show how the Excel will look like when we discuss the next agent. I will show you that. Fine. So similarly, this next agent, learning description enrichment, what it generates is what differs. So depending on that objective, some input parameters you give to the agent also will be different. Right? Otherwise, the overall process remains the same. The same page is where you configure it, add a new agent. You run it also the same way and then get a Excel which will have the output which admin can review and upload. So this agent will generate summaries and descriptions for multiple learning items as per the scope. Fine, creating this also, same page, we are already in this page. So go to add and then learning description enrichment. So config options will just be different because depending on what functionality this agent is for. This is the category, that is the AI agent that we chose. And here also you can provide a filtered list to process only required items. So once you create a filtered list with this particular subscriber, you will be able to select it here. So though there are filtered lists of learning item type, the subscriber for those is not learning description enrichment. That's why no filter list is showing as of now. Fine. And because this is about generating some text, you have to select the language, right? That's the only different parameter you have here. And then save or apply and then run it. So once this also completes fine, just like in the other case I mentioned, it will generate an Excel which you can download that will have the list of learning items as per the scope you defined. And it will have the generated description and short description for each of those. So if you want to see a preview of how it looks like without even waiting till practicing this, you can see that in the readiness documentation. So this was a feature in 2 releases back. So let's see this in 25B, learning description enrichment agent. Right, so how you can configure this agent, how you can run is what it's showing in the first screenshot. And then once the agent completed running and provided the Excel that you can download, this is how the Excel will look like. So here notice that these are all the learning items that it has considered in scope as per the filtered list that you gave. And then what is the existing short description and existing description, if any. And then what is the one that is generated that it gives in the proposed short description and proposed description. So here, if administrator wants to accept that, they can just change that flag to Y and then click on upload. So here you have the upload button in this Oracle VB tab. Then it will get updated for this respective learning item. And also notice that this proposed short description and proposed description, these two columns are not grayed out, right? These are editable white background columns, which means you can tweak also if required. It's not that whatever AI generated has to be accepted. Administrator can do changes if required and then upload. Fine. And then similarly, the next agent that was there, learning catalog translation. So this uses Google translation services to get translation suggestions for few fields like title, description, and so on, right? So you can translate to different languages. Fine. So for this also, these overall steps remain the same. Let's just see the minor differences you will find in the different options or input parameters for the agent, right? Learning catalog translation. So once you add the new agent to configure that, fine, same way, use the filtered list to define on which set of items you want to run this agent. It will be generated only for those items. And then translation provider, Google is the only one supported. Once you have to enable the integration, and then you will be able to select the account name here. Just similar to how for the external providers integration we discussed earlier, you had to give an account name when you enable it. After that, you will be able to choose the account name in the later steps, right? So once you enable Google Translation, whatever account name you gave, you will be able to select it here. And then since this is about translation from one language to the other, in this translation to, you just have to provide to which language you want to translate it to. Fine. So once you configure this like this, next steps are pretty similar. Save it or apply and then run it. Once it completes, you will get the Excel that you can download where admin can review the translations. And then for each learning item, they can review and decide whether to accept it or reject it, similar to the process I showed in the prior agent, same process applicable here. All right, so that's all the different core or functional use cases specific to Learning Cloud. And before proceeding with first break at this logical point, let's do a quick check of how many of you are familiar with the upcoming functionalities that we will discuss, that is approvals, APIs, and HDL. Because some of these you will know from the prerequisite global HR workshop or even other modules, right? Because these last few use cases leverage these functionalities. Depending on whichever of these functionalities, majority of you are not familiar, I can spend more time on that, maybe go a little slow on those particular functionalities versus the others. All right, so I'm launching a poll in Zoom with 3 questions, one each for these upcoming functionalities we will discuss after the break. Can all of you please vote to confirm if you are familiar or not with these tools or functionalities? All right, thanks all. Thanks for this input. Yeah, so the trend is almost similar to what we find in other workshops. Majority of you are familiar with approvals config, and quite a few of you also familiar with HDL, but majority are new to web services REST API. All right, so we'll explain REST API in more detail, starting with some fundamentals also. So you will not be lost in that use case. And then approvals and HDL, we don't have to start with the very basics then, right? But I'll still explain few things. And in case some of you who are not familiar with this want more details, you can always ask questions in Q&A, as you know. And before proceeding with the first break, let's see the questions. So Mohammed is asking, you can change access to those, right? You can change access to those. This you asked almost half an hour back. So maybe when we were doing the external provider integration use case, right? Yes, you can change access. I have showed that also, right? You can go to manage default access and change that access. All right, so if no more questions, let's proceed with first break at this logical point. We'll see you all back after 15 minutes as always. Hello everyone again, and hopefully all of you also back. So let's discuss these two questions we have as of now, and then start the next use case of approvals after that. First one, Kiran asking how to automatically capture attendance of learners who are attending VALT session. All right, so there are different percentages that you can set to mark a learner as complete if they attended that particular percentage of the virtual session time. So that also you can see in the same page that we saw yesterday for the catalog defaults, where we discuss these different access rules. Right, one of the rules here is what is helpful for this use case of marking learner complete if they attend so much percentage of the virtual activity. So here it is set to 70%, and here you can also allow it to be overridden at offering level, which means this rule you will also find for respective offerings. Right, so let's see this in offering also. Let's consider one of the instructor-led offering we created yesterday. So in this offering also, you will be able to see that setting and change it to a different percentage if required. Right, once it is configured, it should show there. Yeah, so you can enable whether you want to mark it as complete if attendees have attended so much percentage. All right, for our workshops also, we have such a setting. I think we set it to 80% or something close to that. Only then you will be considered as completed this particular workshop, and you will get a completion email also at the end of the workshop. And then next question, Sushant asking, as per important actions and considerations for learning and development 25D, you are asking about those two deprecation notices. And the question is, so we are yet to go live, but we have configured and tested these integrations in SIT and UAT. Can we continue to use them, or will these be impacted as it is not deployed on prod? All right, so this is actually a borderline scenario for you. If you used it earlier, you can continue to use it, but you are saying you used it in one instance, but not the important production instance. So one quick thing that you can check right now is see if that particular deprecated provider is showing, okay, not here, if it is showing in this setup page where you can enable that integration, right? Go to configure external providers. So here notice that some of the deprecated ones do not show here. And one of those deprecated ones, Intuition, shows with this some other description, which is an indication that it may not work totally fine, right? And the other one you mentioned does not show here. So that is a good indication to know whether you can use it in prod or not. And irrespective of this, irrespective of whether it shows here or doesn't show here, it is still worth checking with Oracle representative, the customer contact you will have. I mean, the customer success manager from Oracle side that will be there for that customer to see if it can still be enabled in prod, because you have already used it in SIT and UAT, right? It is worth trying that even if it doesn't show here, because it is not like a regular case. It is a little exception case for you that you have used it earlier, but not yet in prod. And the next question, all right, thanks, Sushant. Thanks for acknowledging that. All right, another two questions just came, so let's discuss these also. Kiran asking, how is 70% attendance determined for VILT? Is it based on hours, such if 100-hour session and learner has spent 70 hours, then it means learner met the requirement, right? 70% is between those scheduled start time and the actual end time. So scheduled start time and actual end time will be considered as 100%. Of that 100%, how much the learner attended will be considered to determine that completion. Next one, Nikhil asking if we do not have Core HR, can we use this Learning Cloud module or Core HR must be implemented before using this? You must implement Core HR because all this data that you see, I mean, even some of the setup data that you entered, right? For example, the offering coordinator and so on requires person records. And even doing these configurations in this page, because person record is tagged to some of these configurations, you will be able to do only with a person record based user ID, not a regular implementation user ID like HCM, IMPL also. Fine, all that I mentioned that in lab guide also that you will be going through when you practice anyway. Like I mentioned here, even for the setups that you do in that page, don't consider the HCM IMPL user, consider users like this because that person related information will be saved for the user who is saving those setups. And the person record will also be required when you load some of these setups using HDL also that we will see later today. All right, so if no more questions, let's start this next use case discussion. Employees requesting this learning that is not available in the learning catalog is one such transaction we already saw on Monday. Because when they search the catalog, they don't find the relevant one. They can be provided option to request such non-catalog learning. And such request may have a bigger cost implication because the learning item is not even there in the catalog. If it is there, maybe the cost and all is already defined and determined. But for such non-catalog request for which the organization may have to create a new learning item, if it is a justified request or many employees requesting for it and all such reasons. So workflow for these non-catalog requests can typically be based on the price also. Like if the price is up to some particular threshold, like $50, $100 or so, maybe line manager should approve or some particular level should approve. But if it is beyond that threshold, if it is much higher, then it may require additional approval. Sorry for the interruption, everyone. Back now. Yeah, so like I was mentioning, approval can be based on such factors like the price, based on if it is up to a reasonable level, some particular approval may be sufficient, maybe first level line manager. If it is beyond that particular threshold amount, additional approval may be required by next level line manager or the one after that even, or by additional approval type like learning admin or HR representative also. Which means the number of levels of approvals and the type of approvers can differ based on different factors. So this you can achieve by configuring this learning request approval rule. And then within that request, you will be using these different attributes relevant to these parameters you have in this requirement. One is price, second is currency also. And then what is the type of learning request? Because here it says it is for non-catalog item. For catalog items, maybe there are different rules. So those conditions will be different. Fine. And then what are the other approval rules available? Let's start seeing all these in instance directly. So the navigation for configuring these different approval rules, same as what you know from other modules. If it doesn't show there, let's try from the navigator, go to tools section and then transaction console. From the navigation only, those of you who said you are not familiar with approvals yet, the minority of you, you can understand this is applicable across modules, not specific to Learning Cloud. So go to approval rules to see what are all the different approval rules that you can configure from here. So across modules, you will find HR related, absence related, and so on also. Right. And here you can search with this particular module name or rule name kind of keywords. So in learning, you can configure these different approval workflows. Fine. So for the current use case, because it is for non-catalog workflow routing, non-catalog type of learning request, that still goes in the same learning request that is available. Fine. So let's go to the last one here, learning request. And before you do the configuration in configure rules, ensure this bypass approvals is disabled. You will be enabling bypass approval only when you don't want to trigger the approval workflow. You want it to be directly committed to the database without any approval. Right? In that case, the rules you configure will not even trigger. So ensure this is disabled first and then go ahead and configure the rules. Right, these instances tend to be a little slow because these are demo instances, not having so much capacity as your typical customer instances. But when you do for your customer, it will not be so slow. Right. So before starting this config, let's delete all this additional configuration that is there and set it back to what it is as default. So you can understand from beginning. Fine. So this is the default rule, just a placeholder for you. Because as you see, the condition here is 1 to 1. This 1 equal to 1 will always be evaluated to true, but you want different routing based on different conditions. So this is the condition you will have to change. So in all these different approval rules, you will find similar design. Firstly, in the if part, you will have to configure what are the conditions, what are the different types of routing you have. For each such, you will have different ifs. And then for each of these if conditions, you will configure after the then to whom it should be routed. So these are the two different configurations for any approval rule. So when you consider the customer requirements also, you can start visualizing it that way. Try to understand what are the different conditions you have, and for each condition, what is the routing path. So here one condition is cost is up to that threshold. Second condition is if it is over that. And for each of these, you have the requirement who should approve. Right? So you have the required inputs to start the config. And these conditions you can change by going to configure rule conditions. There you can edit this 1 equal to 1 condition. That is one approach. Or another way is to change the status of this existing rule to inactive so that it is just there for reference in case for later you need to use it if you want to enable. And this is especially relevant in other modules like talent management, where even this default approval rule will have quite some configuration. So you may not want to lose that configuration. Let the existing one be there, at least for reference. Right? So change this to inactive, and then you will have the indication there also that it is not a solid line. Now it is dotted red, indicating the rule is not active. It will not be evaluated. But you have it for later reference if you need to refer the good amount of configuration you have in some rules. In this rule, you don't have good config. It is just standard 1 equal to 1 anyway. Fine. And then let's add a new rule for our requirement. You can name the rule name as per the condition it represents, this is for non-catalog and cost up to some threshold. The rule name can be non-catalog and cost less than or equal to 100, and also the currency. Fine. So here you have provided just the name, but you have to configure those different conditions, which will give you those different criteria that you can do by going to this configure rule conditions. And then this is the default rule that we saw there. Edit this. Instead of 1 equal to 1, you have to provide the different criteria fields now. Fine. So here you want to compare data of an existing attribute, right? Because the conditions here in your requirement are based on price, currency, and what is the type of learning item. So you have to use these three attributes for it. So let's configure for the first condition of learning item type. Once you choose the attribute there, you will be able to select from the different attributes you have here. All these different attributes you can quickly go through, so you'll understand which ones are supported in this particular rule. So when you have a customer requirement, you will know whether you will be able to achieve that requirement or not, depending on whether you have that field here. And sometimes though you see a field here, especially it happens for some DFF fields, you may not really have the data in that field. So in case the requirement is based on such additional fields, you can do a quick POC to ensure it is really supported field, not just showing here. In addition to showing here, it is really supported also is what we have to ensure. Right here for our first condition of non-catalog item, you can use this learning item type, this particular attribute, and then compare it to, for that you have all these different operators. You want to compare it to one particular value. That particular value you can enter as a string here directly, or because that learning item type will have predefined set of valid values, you can select it from the list of values also. So this way you will also know what are the other type of learning items for which you can configure different rules. Right? For our current requirement, you can choose this non-catalog. So we added one condition and you have to add two more conditions for the currency and the price also. For that, add and condition and then add next expression here. One expression is already added. So this time again, you want to compare value that is in an attribute, just that the attribute name will be different. Here you can choose the maximum price attribute. And this is for cost less than or equal to 100, we mentioned, right, in the rule name. So less than or equal to, and compare it with that particular threshold. Fine. And then third condition also you can add same way. Add expression and then select from attribute, just that the attribute will be different. You will have to select the currency now. Right? Currency equal to, the requirement we had was only for dollar, US dollars. So you can select here from the LOV like we did earlier for the first attribute, or also you can directly enter the string if you know that value. Fine. This is how you can build a rule using this graphical approach. And as you build that, it will build this text also automatically. And once it says no issues there, all looks okay. Once you are back to this page, keep saving your work often here so that when you face some errors, you will not have to redo everything. Fine. So that's how you are able to configure the condition for the first parameter you had there, or first criteria. Same way you can configure the rule when the price is less than that threshold or greater than that threshold. Right? Because this is for the less than condition you configured. You can add another rule, do all that process. That is one way. But another useful, quicker way, another way is to duplicate this. Because in this rule, second rule that you add, same conditions that you added in the prior rule are required. Just minor changes you will have to do. Instead of less than or equal to, you just want to change it to greater than. So instead of following the same process using this duplication, you get all these conditions, and rule name also you can change. This is greater than, and you can remove the additional suffix that the system has added. And description also you can use to document more details. And then same way, go to configure rule conditions and change only this one condition that we want to change. Fine. So whenever you have the conditions existing already in a different rule, this is a recommended method. You don't have to start from scratch. Leverage the existing rule by duplicating it and doing minor changes as required for this new rule. So the first part of the config is done. You have configured the different criteria and different rules. And in each rules, now you have to define who should approve. For our current use case, if it is up to the threshold, line manager should approve. So here for the first rule, for line manager approval, you can use management hierarchy. So you can click the then and then click plus on this particular approval type. It will get linked to that, right? And one more approach is to drag and drop this approval type on this particular then. Then also it will link to that. Fine. And then within this management hierarchy, how many levels of manager should approve, which manager should approve, all that you will be able to configure in the bottom portion. Select that approval type, whether approval is required or is it automatic approval, or it should be just for information, all that you can configure in action type. And which manager type. In Core HR, you have more manager types maybe if you configure such in addition to line managers. And if you want it to be routed for the other types of managers, that is also possible. For all that also, you are still using the management hierarchy only. Fine. And approval chain of the requester, start with manager, first level. Number of levels, one is sufficient for us here because first level line manager should approve. And then who is the top manager until when it should be routed. So for one level, this manager will be sufficient. If you increase the levels, you can choose second manager level, or you define a user who will be much higher level also. All right, so that's the config for the first condition. And similarly, for the second rule, when it is greater than the threshold, then also manager should approve, because here the requirement says if over that, additional approval by HR rep required, which means manager should still approve. After that, one more level will be there. So in this management hierarchy, the same default rules will work, because first level manager should approve in this case also. And after that, how do you add next different type of approver is again linking this one of the other types of approvers by selecting this level. So that will become the next level. So whenever you have to route it based on this admin type of users like HR representative or learning administrator or so, you can leverage application role. This is one approach, because all such admins will have a separate role assigned to them, like your custom learning administrator data role also, or HR administrator role. And one more approach is to use a representative, which relates to your AOR functionality, areas of responsibility. So whenever you have these two approaches, the recommended approach is AOR, because once you implement AOR, you will be able to achieve more functionalities also. Use AOR in multiple places, like in your security also you can use, right? And one more area where you can use AOR, we saw that yesterday during the observation checklist configuration. And once you decide to use AOR like this, once you link it as the next level, all you have to configure is to which type of representative it should be routed to. Hope all of you are familiar how you configure AOR in 4HR. You will be configuring different type of representatives and defining the scope. Each representative is responsible for which set of employees or which criteria, employees in some country, business unit, and so on. So system will automatically determine for this employee who is the particular HR representative or learning specialist as required, whichever you define here. Fine. So that's how you have configured approval for these non-catalog routing two requirements you have here. And then to test this, see the end-to-end flow, you can go to self-service where learner can initiate these transactions. You can do two different transactions, give different pricing so that you will see the result, each getting routed differently based on the threshold you configured. Right, so the same self-service pages that we discussed on Monday. So learning catalog, here you will have some actions like I mentioned, and in my learning also you will have some additional actions. Here you will have the non-catalog learning that employee can request. So in addition to all these standard fields like this title and so on, cost is also what employee can enter here and also the currency. Fine. So in addition to this configuration we have done as per the requirement given, one more thing you have to do, one very important best practice recommendation is evaluate if there are any more data scenarios possible than the conditions you have in the requirement. So that you can configure approval rule for all different possible data conditions instead of leaving some gaps. So apply that principle here. How can you know if there are more data scenarios possible than you configured? To analyze this transaction page, what are the different things employee can enter here? Like what is the currency employee can choose? Instead of USD, they can choose some other currency also. The some other currency is not mentioned in requirement. Right? Whatever reason, by mistake or intentionally, if employee chooses some other currency than you expected, instead of such transactions getting stuck, it is better to capture those also by configuring another rule for such transactions. Right? And some of these fields are not even mandatory. They need not even enter cost and currency. Without that also they can submit. So all these are the recommendations you have to tell customers instead of just alone relying on the requirement you got from customer. Give these suggestions. These are the other additional transactions possible. If employee enters such transaction, who do you want it to route to? Right? So for such catch-all kind of criteria, which are unexpected transactions, generally it may be routed to some HRIS manager or admin or so. So once you finalize that requirement, do the configuration for such criteria also in the same rule as we saw. So again, back to our transaction console. All right, let's open this in another tab. It's not opening the navigator even. Fine. So finally here we go, tool section again and transaction console. So to capture those additional scenarios, see what criteria will work and add another rule for that criteria the same way. So if you want to capture the non-catalog requests, which have different currency maybe, right? Currency is an attribute you already have here. So you can duplicate that rule, non-catalog, and here the price does not matter because you are capturing multiple currencies. Here you will say currency not equal to USD, right? And all these conditions you got, you know which condition has to be changed. You don't have to compare with a number because whatever number you put doesn't make sense. In different currencies, it will mean different value. So remove that price and then change this to not equal to USD. And in this case, whoever is the approver that should approve, if it is some particular user to whom it should be routed to, then you can add this users type of approver. And then here you can define what is that exact user to whom it should be routed. So select user there, and then you will be able to enter that user ID next. All right, everyone. So that is how you can configure for such different requirements, and more importantly, ensure to configure for any gaps in the requirement also by making the requirement comprehensive, capture requirements for such additional possible transactions as well. Fine. And then you can do one more transaction after this config where you enter a different currency or do not even enter currency and see that it gets routed differently. And now let's get started with this last and big use case related to data migration, because this we have to cover in both the different approaches, REST APIs and also HDL. So firstly, some important points from an architecture perspective, because this migrating these different items involves migrating the content items also, like your PDFs and video files and so on. And those attachment files which you require for the self-paced activities, those are not stored in Learning Cloud. They are stored in a third-party vendor, that is Akamai Technologies. And obviously it integrates with Learning Cloud. And how seamless is the integration? You've already seen that on Monday, because though we did so many transactions in UI, uploading content, playing content, and so on, it was as if everything was happening within Learning Cloud. Akamai was nowhere visible. It's not like you had to log in separately to Akamai and do some things there. Unless you noticed one thing where Akamai is visible. If not, I will show you that anyway. All that is possible because it is direct connection. It is not through some other layer or so. So you don't have to log in separately to that system. So though in the background, all that content was actually getting uploaded to a different third-party system, all that was seamless. And same, it will be for the employees also. When they play the content, they'll just launch it from Learning Cloud and it will play. They don't even have to know that it is getting played from a different system. But we have to know when we are migrating data, because how you migrate data to that third-party system is different. Because those of you who said you are familiar with HDL already, you will know that you can use HDL for the objects that are stored in HCM Cloud. This attachment object is not even stored in Learning Cloud, not in Oracle Cloud. So you cannot use HDL for it. You have to load it using REST APIs. So when you upload file to the Akamai system, you have to use API of the Akamai system. Right, so that's the difference this architecture causes, mainly in the data migration. When you load in bulk, you will have to follow a different approach. right? And then when it comes to other data in Learning Cloud, like course offering and all these other metadata configuration objects, for this, same as other modules, you can use HDL. So HDL means HCM data loader, for those of you who said not familiar with that yet, and you can use it to load data across multiple objects which are stored in HCM cloud using that HDL. Fine, and also consider the different limits for different file types. This was a standard limit till an earlier release. The limit was 1 GB for all the different kind of files. But we have just increased that limit for a few types of files. All those you can understand from these different enhancements, like I said, increased upload limit for the learning content. Right? So earlier it was 1 GB, which continues to be the limit for PDF files, because PDF files exceeding this limit is rare. But for the other items like videos, now the limit is enhanced to 2 GB. Right? And if you want to load even bigger item than 2 GB, as we say here, you can log a SR so that we understand that particular scenario to see if it can be approved. Otherwise, the workaround is to split it to smaller parts. So in case there is a video file that is exceeding that 2 GB limit, split it into maybe shorter duration. So the size for each part will be less than 2 GB. And then each of those videos you can sequence in your offering, in self-paced offering or even blended offering. You can add activities and sequence them like video 1, video 2, video 3, so that employee will play one video after the other in sequence. And one more difference this kind of architecture causes is for the refresh, that is P2T of the instances. Because what happens when these instances are refreshed, production to test or one test to another test instance, only the data in Oracle Cloud will be copied, which means the learning items that are there in this third-party system will not be copied. How can you get those learning items again in the target, the refreshed instance if you want? You can load it again. Same like how you loaded earlier, load it again. All right, that is one. But then few quarters back, I think now it's been more than maybe 2 years, we provided this enhancement where you can copy few limited items by marking those items in the source instance that you want to copy that to the target instance that you have to do before the refresh. So even with these enhancements, it is not like all the items you will be able to. And also it is not automatic. Because when you raise SR for the refresh, you have to explicitly tell the support team or ops team that you want to copy data in this third party provider also. And after that, one more step you will have to do is to run a batch process in the target instance after the refresh is done. Then those selected few items will be made available for you in the target destination instance. All right, so having understood these important things from an architecture perspective, how you should approach these firstly. So now you know you have to do different steps in different systems, because just loading in Learning Cloud is not sufficient. Some steps you will have to do in the Akamai system also. So of these different types of learning content, for WebLink is where you don't have to do anything in Akamai, because you don't have a separate file for it. It is just a text like any other text. So you don't have to load in Akamai. But for the other three is where you have to load in that third party system also. That's why it is a multi-step process, because just uploading the content file in Akamai is not sufficient too, right? Because how does Learning Cloud know which particular file in Akamai should be played for which particular item you created in the catalog? So to achieve that linking seamlessly, First, you have to create just a placeholder for that content item in Learning Cloud. Because this is in Learning Cloud, you will be able to use Learning Cloud REST API. And then you can use few attributes that this API will provide you. That attributes you can use to upload file in Akamai. Those attributes are the ones which links this item and content ID in Learning Cloud is linked to this particular file in Akamai. Because these attributes that you get will be different for each of the items. For the second content ID you create, it will be different attributes. When you load the second file to Akamai, you use those different attributes. So the second item will be linked to second file. So that is how Learning Cloud will know for each of these items, this is the exact file that is stored in Akamai that should be played. And before all this, obviously, you should take care of the security aspect, the different privileges required for these different web services. All these will be there in the shielded role, which is the integration specialist role, HCM integration specialist, the full form of it. So with that role name itself, you will know that is also not specific to Learning Cloud, that you can use for across modules. Its access spans across different other REST APIs you have in HCM in other modules also. So you need to create a data role using that job role, assign that data role to the user account you use to access these REST APIs. Hope everyone knows how to create a data role. That is also a basic core HR setup and how you can attach it to a user account. If not, you can let me know in the Q&A panel. I can show that quickly. And then to access any web service or REST API, and all these principles again for the majority of you who said are new to REST APIs, that you are not familiar with this yet, right? So to access any REST API web service, you should know what is the exact URL to use. So let's see the URL here. All right, let's zoom this. You'll be able to follow easily. Because every API will have a URL, and obviously you have to use the correct exact one. So this one that we will use for creating the content items, let's understand this. This has two different parts. It will be easy to understand that way. The first part, until this .com, this is the host name, also called as server name. And this you can get from the instance URL itself. Right, so when you log into this particular instance, dev 18 as it says there, right, notice the URL until.com. This is the exact one that you will use for the REST API also. Fine, so the first part is very simple, the same way you log into UI, that URL itself you will use. And then this second part, this is also called as resource path. And this is what will differ for different objects. So obviously different modules, different objects supported in REST API will have this differently. And all this information you can find in the same help center, docs.oracle.com, where you have list of tables link, list of APIs link. From that, you will be able to get this resource path for each of the objects. Fine. So that's how you know now what is the URL to use for the first REST API that you will send to create this content ID in Learning Cloud. And how to get the URL for Akamai REST API, because you didn't log into the system. You don't know the URL so far. That URL also is one of the attributes that you will get at the successful completion of this first API that you execute in Learning Cloud. Because when you are executing this API, we know that there are some attributes that you will need for the next step of loading file to Akamai. That URL also is an attribute that you will find in the output. Fine. So that's the important things before getting started with these REST API executions. And yeah, one more thing is, as you see, all these also connect over HTTPS protocol, which means you will need a software client to send these HTTPS requests and also display the output of the request. The minority of you who said you are familiar with REST APIs, you can use whichever is the tool approach you are familiar with. There are multiple free open softwares that you can use. You can Google to find also. And I'll be using curl tool, which is command line utility. Right, so you can Google to know more details about this. It is a free open software, which means you can run it on different operating systems. And in this curl website, there are different commands and all summarized in the documentation. You can go through that if you want to understand this in more detail. Right, here you will find the different commands possible along with syntax you have to use for each of those, and some working examples also, good samples for each of it. Right, so in addition to the what are the things you need to use for this use case, if you want to explore further, if you want to learn this particular thing in more detail, then you can continue going through this. Fine, and there are other tools also that you may leverage. For example, one such tool is Postman. The advantage of this tool is it comes with graphical UI. It provides a good GUI. So it will be more easy to send the requests and also to read the responses. And because it has graphical UI, you will find more features in that, like saving the request for future reference. So every time you don't have to copy paste an earlier request, you can save it and then execute it the next time. And also it will have features like you can create variables, environments where you can store the passwords. Right? And there are different tools like that you can explore. Like one such other one is this advanced REST client. And if you want to compare these different tools, you can find different blogs and different videos about that also, explaining you these comparisons. But for these basic functionalities that we need just for uploading these items, I mean, you won't need so many advanced features that are there in these different tools. But in case if you want to explore REST APIs further, this is the direction how you can explore. Fine. So now using curl tool, let's go ahead and build our first REST API, which is to create content ID in Learning Cloud. All right, prior to this, let me see if anything in Q&A about security, if any of you wanted to know that. All right, nothing related to this. So hopefully all of you familiar with this. Few subject related questions, we will continue to discuss those later. Fine, so once you have taken care of the security aspect, and now let's see how you can construct this REST API request for the first one to create a content ID in our Learning Cloud. Right, so this is the request you can send for creating a content item. So let's understand what are the different parts in this, how you should prepare, structure this. Apologies again, I am back now. Let's continue the discussion. Fine, so here firstly, you are using this curl command to invoke that utility itself, because this you will be invoking in command line. And then next you can have this netrc file option. And here you are providing a file name, that netrc is the file name, which can store the credentials for your connection, that is the username and password. Because this you are executing from a separate tool, command line or so, you have to provide the credentials separately. In UI, you are able to enter as the first step. So here also, this is the first thing you are taking care of. The same username password that you use to log into the instance, assuming that has the required roles, that detail you can store in this file. That is one way. Another way is also you can provide username password inline within this request itself. For that, you will have to use this syntax -u representing user detail. And then username password you have to enclose in double quotes delimited by colon. So prior to the colon, provide the user ID. After the colon, provide the password. Fine. If you are okay to include this inline within the request, that is how you do it. All these syntaxes and all I'm mentioning, you can find in the curl tool that is there separately. And those of you who said you know these REST APIs already, you will be familiar with this. But let's wait through these things until we get to executing this use case so that others also can understand. And then next, you are using this -h. This represents header. That is the syntax for it, hyphen and h in capital. So using this header option, you are setting the format for the input you are providing and also for the output that you are expecting from the server. You are using JSON format here, pretty much the standard in REST APIs. And then to create this content item in Learning Cloud, you will have to provide some basic information, like when you have created in UI also, you provided minimum things like title and few things, right? That data also you have to provide as part of this API you are sending. So for that, you are using this -d option to provide data to the server. And this data, instead of providing in text file, you are providing, instead of providing inline, you are providing in this text file. So that is the name of the text file, which will have the actual data of details to use for creating this content. So let's see this text file for the detail, create li PDF. Right. So the file name you will upload is this particular PDF file. And this is, let's say, 25D demo. And let's use some such item number. And notice this item number and different numbers we saw in UI. You could not have your custom numbers, custom naming conventions. But like I mentioned, when you do it in bulk, you can provide your own naming conventions and sequence. So here you can provide like this. So you can relate all these different things you are providing here to the different fields that you know from UI. What is the file name, title, description? So whatever is mandatory in UI that you provided, same things are mandatory here. If you are able to create this content item without providing a description, if it was optional there, here also it will be optional. Fine. So using this detail, it will create the content item. And then next you are providing the URL like we discussed earlier, how to get this URL, how to provide this. That same URL goes in this double quotes. What are the two different paths you are familiar with by now? And then you are using this output approach, output syntax to store the output in this particular file instead of displaying response in the command prompt terminal itself. Because you want to use some of the attributes in the output for the next step. In this step, you will get some attributes that you will use, like Akamai URL and so on, for preparing the next REST API that you will send, right? So it will be easier when it is stored in a text file. Fine. So now let's open command prompt and send this using curl. Let's go to this particular app here. Let's zoom this also. Fine. So prior to sending this, let's also change our working directory, because in a later step, when you are attaching this file, make sure where the file is stored in. The file is stored in this particular folder subfolder. So you can change the working directory like this and then execute this REST API. Fine. So it has just displayed some brief statistics, how much data transferred, how much time it took, and so on. And to see the response, the detailed response that it returned, because we gave this output option here, we can see that in the output file. So this is the output file that just got created 11:15, right? And as it says 0 bytes, so without opening this only, we know this did not succeed because there is no output. Fine. So why it did not succeed could be due to incorrect credentials. That is the first thing you have to check. So for this user, let's change the credentials now, or maybe we can utilize the break to do such things. Anyways, it's almost time for the second and last break. So I'll do that changing password during break, and then we will re-execute this step after the break. All right, everyone, we'll see you all back in 15 minutes. Hello everyone again. Hope all of you also back for this last leg of the workshop. Good to see all of you continuing, though this is the technical part of the workshop, but these technical pieces are not as complex as they used to be in on-premise systems, right? Even in HDL, you will find that it's not so complicated to prepare the file, load the data. It's much simpler than things used to be in on-premise. So that's how like most consultants are techno-functional these days than only technical, only functional. So good to see the trend continuing here in this workshop also. But if you are unable to understand few things or finding few things complex, especially those of you already familiar with functional so far, I mean, then that may mean anyway you will have technical consultant in your team to take care of these things. So no need to worry, but still it will be good to understand few things, at least 20-30%, whatever you're able to grasp, even that will be helpful for you. Right, so we were discussing this first step of creating content ID in Learning Cloud, and that has failed due to incorrect username and password. So now after the password is changed in this file, right, this netarc file is the one which has the password, and this output file is the one that got created. It is zero size, no output. Let's delete this. Once we try the API again, it will generate again. Let's retry this step now. Right, so this was our first try where it executed pretty quickly because not much has been done. Now again try the same REST API. So now it's taking a little more time. Hopefully this means it succeeds. And also you see some additional statistics where it shows time related information and received and so on, which is an indication that some data has been sent, received, how much time it took. And now let's see this output file, which got created again. Now it has some data, 2 KB file, right? And this is the output you get on successful completion of that Learning Cloud API. Initial part, it will have all these standard information, which we have pretty much provided in the file. In addition to that, it also shows the content ID. So this is the content ID that got created in the table, automatically generated ID. It shows that also. Fine. And then the important attributes here, or what you have in this part of the output, upload auth token, right? So here after the authorization data, these set of characters, and after the authorization signature, these set of characters, and the upload location, that is the URL, that is the entire value in these double quotes, are the three things that you need to upload file into Akamai Next. So these are the attributes, three attributes that you have to get from the output of this first API to prepare the next API for uploading file in Akamai. Fine, and prior to that, let's see the status of this item in our catalog, in catalog resources. Back to our learning admin page for that and resources section in content. So here start date maybe prior to that. Let's change it to a different date. Right, so here you have the item that we just created. This is the title and number that we gave in the file. Right, content type, PDF file, status active. This is in URL format, all as expected so far. And when you try to preview this file, notice one thing as it opens this preview. So file not found as expected anyway, because we did not upload the file. Notice the URL. So it is trying to play the file that is in the third party system, in Akamai system. Right? And this is the same URL that you find in the output of the first API also, because it is expecting the file to be played, which is available at this location. As of now, file is not there. We didn't upload. Next, we will upload to this location. After that, it should play fine. All right, now let's see how you can prepare this Akamai REST API. What is the syntax for it? And once you got those attributes, how you can use those attributes in this API. For that, firstly, this header options, invoking curl, you can do the same way. And here in authorization, data, signature, and in this double quotes is where you will embed that output you got. So let's delete this and embed the new data we got in the file. This entire URL also will be different for different item. Fine. Just few minor differences in this API compared to the prior one. In addition to curl, we are also using -v. So what does this particular -v stands for? All that you will understand from the curl documentation that I have shown. This stands for verbose mode, or also called as detail mode, which means it will show some additional information in the terminal so that you can understand what's going on in the background. So this time when you send this API, in addition to just this minimal information it has given, like this brief statistics, you will see more details in the terminal. Fine. And then in these different header options is where you are firstly setting, you want to upload the file. And then in authorization data signature, you will be giving the credentials that you got in the output of the first API. And here you have to provide the URL, which also you got in the output of first API in this file. So let's copy paste this authorization data after the colon and until this double pipe. Right, let that be as a placeholder. And the second one is what we are preparing by copying this data. And similarly, authorization signature after this double quotes and until the end of field. And finally, the third one, the entire upload location, entire text, which is in the double quotes. All right. And in addition to that, we are using this -x option to upload this file. And this is the file that is in our working directory, the directory that we changed to. We want to upload this PDF file. We are providing this PDF file for the Akamai API only, because we are uploading this in the third party system. Let's go ahead and execute this second API now. This is for the Akamai system upload that we are doing. So now in addition to all these statistics, it is also showing all this additional information that is due to that -v option that we used. And we wanted to see all this additional information so that you can also see the request did not succeed, which you can understand with this HTTP 403 forbidden. So this error means it is not success. So why did it fail? It failed because these authorization tokens it gives in this upload authorization token, authorization data and signature, these are valid for a short duration, valid for 30 seconds only, because these are like credentials to connect to the Akamai system, kind of user ID and password, right? So for security reasons, they are valid only for a short period. So now for whatever reason, you did not send within 30 seconds, when you are preparing manually or explaining and so on, it took time. Then how do you send again is by getting these attributes again. right? How do you get these attributes again? You have to get again from Learning Cloud only. And this time you have to get by referring the existing item, because you want the details again for the same item. For the same item you created in Learning Cloud, you still did not upload the file. So this time you don't have to provide all the data of title and so on that you provided in the first API. You just have to provide reference of the existing item that is there in database. Right? So for that you can use this particular REST API, much simpler than the prior one we have used. The syntax remains the same, curl, netrc, and so on. But then, in addition to this URL, we are also providing the content ID, because we want to get data for the existing content. And this content ID you already have in the output of the first API. So that it will again provide those credentials so that you can upload file for the existing item in Learning Cloud. All right. And this time also it will create a file, and let's try to copy paste and do those activities within 30 seconds. Let's send the API again. So here is where we have to copy paste those details, the new details that we get after we send the next API now. This 30 seconds may seem a short duration, because when you are doing this manually, taking time to explain copy paste, it may seem so. But these REST APIs are useful when you execute this programmatically. Right? In ideal production scenarios, once you do the development activities of how you can generate these APIs and all, the final way in which you execute these will be, you will have a wrapper program on top of it, which will generate these APIs for you automatically, execute one after the other. The program itself will read the output, generate the second one. So when the program is doing that, the time limit is easily sufficient. So now we are understanding this in detail, the syntax and so on, so that you can understand the things that are specific to Learning Cloud. Once these are clear, how you create a program to generate this automatically, you can use whichever program you are familiar with, or maybe others in your organization are familiar with, so that all these can be automated. Because the advantage of doing this using all this coding and all is only when you are able to do it in bulk. You run one program that will take care of generating 100 APIs, uploading 100 objects one after the other automatically. That's the advantage of it. Further, there should be another program which creates all these APIs for you. So what are the APIs you have to create, or others in your organization, whoever are familiar with whatever programming language you use, is what we are understanding. So if others are helping you with this to generate this is the requirement you have to tell them. This is the syntax you have to use, and in the output, this is the particular part you have to consider after the colon, after the double pipe, and embed this into this particular portion before you create this second one. So those are the requirements you have to give to that particular technical person who may be helping you with these technicalities of automating this. Right? So now here, let's execute this API and copy paste the details here in this portion and try to send within that particular duration. Right, this create li that was created 10 minutes back as output of the first one. But now anyways, when we send this is a separate file that it will create. So that file can be there as is also. So now we are sending this OLC API again to get the attributes for the reason we discussed. And again, those attributes we will use and send the Akamai REST API next. All right, paste the details. And once you have the file here, this is the file that just got generated. Let's copy these details, authorization data until this double pipe to here, and then authorization signature similarly after the colon till the end of the field that goes here, and then execute this. Fine. So now it gives HTTP 200, which means no error. It went through fine. And after that, if there is no post processing required for the content type, once you uploaded the content in Akamai, you are good to preview the content. As we discussed in UI also on Monday, there is no post processing applicable when you upload PDF file, but it will be applicable for e-learning and video file only, that we will discuss next. But prior to this, let's see the result of this step. The same content title is there. Now the difference is when you try to preview it, it should open the PDF that we uploaded. Right? So this is the test PDF that we uploaded, opening it from the same Akamai system automatically. So that's the end-to-end process of how you can upload PDF file. But like I mentioned, if you are uploading other two types of content, video or online content, in the case of UI upload also, the additional step was a batch process had to process those. And then it was activated in UI also. And the batch process when you upload it in UI triggered automatically. The difference is when you are uploading these items in bulk, the batch process will not trigger automatically. Why? Because using REST APIs, you will typically be uploading hundreds of objects in a very short period. That's the purpose why you want to use REST APIs firstly, right? So it will not be good to trigger hundreds of batch processes in that short period. And also you may want to control when you want to do the post processing. It's not that you have to do immediately. You can have control when you want to do that, considering your implementation timeline, time zone, maybe in the night time, whenever the activity is less in the instance, you can run those batch processes separately. Fine. But prior to running that batch process, you have to update the status of such content items to ready for processing. When you uploaded in UI, it was automatically set to ready for processing because you are doing one by one. But here you have to set it to ready for processing and then run the batch process. Then batch process will pick up the ones for which the status is ready for processing. So that way you have total control out of the hundreds of items you uploaded, which items you want to do for post processing at what time. You can do it in batches. So how can you update the status of this particular content item to set it to ready for processing? That you have to do in Learning Cloud. So this is the REST API for that. Notice that in the URL, again, you are using this content ID so that you can set the status only for this required content ID. And then in the data, you are providing the required text to update the status. So let's see this text also that you provide in the file to update the learning item. So this is just the minimal data you are providing. Ingestion status, ORA, MED, transcoding. This is the lookup code which corresponds to ready for processing. Once this API also is complete successfully, then to initiate the post processing, you can run the respective batch process. Fine. So once these steps also are done, then the item will be activated in UI. Then you will be able to preview those videos and playable e-learning files also. For the other type of item, like I said, for web link, there is no separate file you have to upload. It is just a text format type of content you upload. So no need to do anything in Akamai for web link. Fine, everyone. So that's the different aspects of uploading content using REST APIs in Learning Cloud. Firstly, why you have to use REST APIs? Because you are uploading into a different system, third-party system. But HDL is specific to HCM Cloud. So using REST APIs, you are able to achieve this. And after we go through the next use case of HDL, how you can upload other items in Learning Cloud, we will discuss some more best practices, how you can plan your data migration sequence more efficiently. Because now you know before you upload your courses offering activities, especially which are self-paced activities, which have some content, all these content files should be ready first. So I have to complete uploading content and then go ahead with it. But you don't really have to complete all these steps. At some particular step only, you will be able to initiate the HDL load. Because uploading these files can be a time-taking activity, depending on how many files, how big are those files. It can take time, and also post-processing will take time. You don't have to wait for all these steps to upload even your self-paced activities. We will discuss how you can manage that timeline efficiently without waiting for all this. And here you find within this presentation all these different REST APIs that I have showed that were there in this REST API folder here, right? Just that I saved it in text format. It will be easier to explain and copy paste there. Sometimes when you copy paste from these PDFs, you will have to be careful with additional spaces or so that may happen. And for other objects in Learning Cloud, you can use HDL, like I mentioned, for your courses and other objects that you can load. And those of you who said you know HDL, you already know this is the recommended tool for loading bulk data across different modules in HCM. In core HR also, you will be using such different files to load your configurations, worker related data, and also in benefits, absence, and so on. So in Learning Cloud, what are the different objects supported by HDL that you can understand by going to this HDL page itself, though it was there in the slide, you can still understand that from here itself. So with this navigation also, you know, this is also not specific to Learning Cloud. You will find objects across different modules here in data exchange and then view business objects. Fine. So here you will find what are all the different objects supported by HDL for bulk load. All these business object names you can search, and also product area. This almost maps to a module. In some cases where a module has lot of objects, there will be further segregation, like in global HR payroll, you see there is further segregation like setups and others. Let's filter with this learning related objects. Fine. So these are the different objects supported by HDL. Just from the name of the object, you can almost understand which data you can load with it. So this legacy learning item is one thing that is not available in UI, but others you can understand these map to your regular functional objects you saw in UI also. Configurations, metadatas like course and others. Offering you don't have separately because offering is child item of the course. Within the course object, you will be able to find that. Right. And this legacy learning item, this is only for the purpose of tracking the history of completion of employees learning in the legacy system. These are not meant for taking these courses and completing these courses in Learning Cloud. So that's why these are not backed by any content. Just for purpose of tracking history, you don't have to load course and all those objects. You can load much simpler item, which is legacy learning item. Fine. Here for each of these objects, you can understand how many child objects are there, if any, that you can know from the component section. This is the only object that is there. Very simple object. You just have learning item number, title, and so on. But for other objects, you will find a lot more attributes, and in some cases, multiple child objects also in the components. So one such most complex object in Learning Cloud is our course object. So let's see a demo of this. After this, other objects you will find very simple to follow once you understand the complex one. In this object, once it opens the business object page, you can understand these are all the different items that you can load. from within this course object only. Offering also you use the same. For activities also this is the same object. And what are the supported actions by HDL for this object? Create and update are the only ones supported. For some other objects, you may find delete also. So which objects support delete also, that you can quickly understand from this supported actions. And then few more important things here. This is the exact file name you have to use for loading this file. Your own naming conventions not supported. But then all these files you will have to zip and load because these are text format. Lot of compression will be possible. You have to mandatorily zip it and load a zip file only. And name of the zip file can be user friendly. And then this file discriminator is what you will give in the second column of HDL file that we will see, because especially in the case of such object, such business object which has multiple child objects, all these objects will be giving in the same file. How does HDL know which line is for which object? That is using this file discriminator. So each of these child objects will have a different file discriminator. And similarly, you can explore these other simpler objects also, like instructor, classroom, just like how these other objects are simpler from UI setup perspective that we saw on Monday. So here also you will just find one object here and the number of attributes also will be much lesser. For creating instructor record, you have to provide the person detail. So here you are providing person ID or person number and minimal other details like standard fields, source system ID and so on, which are common across other files also are there. Right, so let's see a demo of this course file. How can you create new courses and new offerings for your cutover load that you may extract from your legacy system? How you can prepare this file. All right. So here, in addition to going through that specification, you can also download the template file. Using this, you can get a quick understanding of what are the different attributes there in the file and what are the different child objects also. Because it is in text format, this is how you can understand. These are the different metadata lines, because as you saw in the course object, there were different child objects you can load. You can load offering and activities also using this object. So for that purpose, there are different header lines. Metadata represents header. Load course, you have to use this particular header, but you don't have to include all these fields. You can include only the ones that you are interested in and the mandatory ones anyway. So based on your functional business requirements, you can decide which fields are required. So you can totally customize the file format as you need, except for few things that are mandated, like this position of first two columns is fixed. First one should be metadata to represent header, or if you are giving data, it should have merge. And then second column should be one of these values that are there in metadata so that HDL knows this particular detail line, the order of the columns from the third column. To know what columns are there in each of these, you refer this particular metadata. And then from third column, the order of the columns can be as you want. It is not fixed order, just that you have to follow same order in metadata and merge. So that HDL knows data in this third column is what, fourth column represents which field by checking the order of the columns in the metadata. And then some more such instructions you have supported in HDL are this comment. This will not be used for processing, but for your reference, if you want to use it for things like when you are generating this file from source system, you can say this was generated from so and so instance on so and so date using so and so version of the package or report, whatever it is in the source system, so that you have all those reference for later if required. And more details about each of these columns, what are the length limitations, whether a column is mandatory or optional, what are the alternates for each columns, all that you will find in the business object specification that you had when the earlier screen, when you clicked on the object in the business object details. You can go to attributes tab to see all the different attributes supported in this object along with more explanation. right? So to prepare a file from scratch, you can export this specification to Excel because it will be more easy to understand, filter, copy paste from Excel instead of doing one by one from UI. And also, if you want to leverage some existing files that you will find in different forums like the HDL guide or customer connect or even support site, there will be readily available files for different scenarios. You can leverage those as well. Maybe for some of your requirements, if you need to change few fields, few values, you can do that. But then now let's see how you can create from scratch so that you can understand HDL in more detail when you have to provide this specification and explain this to the customer, if customer is responsible for data extraction, or maybe if some other teams in your organization who are supporting the customer's legacy production, if they are responsible for generating the data, you can explain to them in which format data is required based on firstly the HDL format that you have to finalize. Right, so here among these different fields available for this loading course, first we can focus on the mandatory ones because these are anyway mandatory, you have to include. For new records also we are including because this is new course you are creating in your cutover load prior to go live. Right, so these are the fields that it says are mandatory. Let's copy paste to our HDL working file. We will prepare the file in Excel and then we can convert it to text format so it will be easier to explain that way. All these should be in different columns, all these different rows. So you can copy paste from the third column by transposing. So you get all these different fields as your headers in the metadata line. Fine. First two columns are reserved for that metadata or merge like we discussed, and also the file discriminator. If you want to load two courses, then you will have two merge lines. And then the second column is where you have to provide the file discriminator so that HDL knows the data in this particular line is for this particular object in this file. Right? And same value goes in your detail line also. Fine. And then to provide the data in each of these other fields, let's understand these fields quickly. Firstly, the course ID, as it says, this will be generated by the application and you can use it for existing records. So you cannot use it for new records. But then this is a new course we are creating and it says it is required. So what is the alternate in such case? You can use user key. So instead of course ID, you can use course number. And course number is a field that is anyway mandatory by itself that we already have in the file because this is also required for the new record. So you can remove the course ID because course number you already have. And in course number is where you can have those different custom numbers like we saw in the case of REST API also. This is, let's say, with some particular naming convention like this. Right, and for a next course, the course number will be different because this is a different course. And then effective start date, maybe first of the year or so. This date should be in the format that I typed it in, the YYYY/MM/DD, but it converted it to different format based on the settings in the system or Excel. To avoid that from happening, change the cells format to text like that, and after that it will retain this format. And then next, owned by person ID. Remember, this person name was defaulted when you created a course in UI also. It took the user ID, right, of the same logged in person. You could change it in that field. So that is the information you have to provide here also. And then this person ID information, those of you who are familiar with tables, you know you can get it from Parallel PeopleF that will have the mapping between person number and person ID. That is one approach, but that approach has additional step that you have to maintain that mapping. And if you are generating this file from the legacy system, You have to export that mapping to legacy system, take care of it during generating those files. Because the person ID is unique in HCM cloud, legacy system does not know until you maintain the mapping. So instead of that additional step, again, alternative is to use the user key, which is owned by person number. Person number you already know, it is available in UI. Maybe it is the same person number in legacy system also from a core HR perspective. Then it can be directly provided here. Fine, I think person ID of the user we were using, that is Curtis Fetty, should be 101. Let's see here. You can check that in this person management page, though this is an older page, still handy. Yeah, so we are using this particular person number for both these courses. And then title of the course, this is the first course and this is the second course we are loading. And there should not be any blank columns in between. So if you remove a particular header, you can move the columns to the left or you can delete this column. And then any additional fields you may want to include, depending on the requirements, you can see the optional fields. If you want to mention the pricing, you can include that currency field, right? And also this minimum price, maximum price. Publish start date, publish end date. These were defaulted when you created from UI. Publish start date was mandatory one. So here, though we do not include, it was mandatory from UI perspective and it defaulted. So same thing when you upload from HDL also. If you do not provide it, it will default to the current date. But if you are loading these courses and all to be effective from next month or so, if you are loading in advance for the different use cases we discussed on Monday, same way you can include this publish start date and provide a different start date. Fine. So that's how you can prepare the course HDL file for your specific requirements to include the fields that you need only. No need to include all the other fields that were there in the standard specification. And then similarly, let's see how you can prepare the offering specification that way, right? So here also go to attributes. You can export all attributes and in Excel you can analyze which ones you want to include. Right, so here apply the filter to focus on the mandatory ones. So these are all the fields it says you must include, right? And these ones we are providing for the from the third column by transposing to get it into different columns format. And first column, the same thing, metadata merge. If you want to create two different offerings, two different merge lines. And then what is the file discriminator that you can understand from this specification? For offering, it is offering v3. All right, next offering ID, just similar to course ID we saw in the course file. This also will be automatically created the moment the offering gets saved to that particular table. So you cannot provide it upfront. So the alternate was to use course number as we discussed earlier. Same thing here, you can use offering number instead. And that offering number you already have here. So let's say this is the number, sequence and format that we are following. And then in addition to this offering number, it is also saying course ID is mandatory. Because in UI also, as you notice, to create offering, you have to first tell the system for which course you are creating it. An offering is an instance of the course. The course should be there first, and then you can create offering for it. Right? So for that reason, you have course ID as a mandatory field here. And this course ID also same way. If you are loading for an existing course, you can query that learning item table, giving the course ID and provide that course ID here. Or user-friendly approach is to use the alternate fee you have in the user key, that is your course number that you already have in this file. And in case you are creating this offering for the same course that you are loading in this file, you have to use the course number only, because for this course number, the course ID is not generated. ID will be generated when the course is saved to the table. So in that case, you will anyways have to use one of the existing fields that you have within this file. And then if you are creating this two offerings for the same course, you can provide this same course number. So for this first course, you are creating two offerings, and for the second course, you are not creating any offerings in this file. Maybe you can create later. Fine. And then similarly, the effective start date, you had effective start date here already, and coordinator ID. You can get the person ID, like I mentioned, when we discuss the owned by person ID field, or you can change it to person number. Like the same way here also, you can change it to coordinator number. So let's change this field also to coordinator number. And same way, like how we change the owned by person ID to person number, you can change this also. And then next you have to provide language code. And whenever there are these fields like language code and others which have some predefined set of values based on a lookup, in the specification you will find that lookup type name also, so that you can easily know for valid values in this field you can get from this lookup. Right, so you can use this particular lookup code. And similarly, offering type, for the different offering types, you can refer this lookup. Learn delivery mode, also called as learning format or the offering type. So let's create two different types of offering: self-paced, for that is the code, and instructor-led, for that ORA ILT is the lookup code in that particular lookup. Fine. And then title, you can have similar title with a suffix indicating this is self-paced, and then this next one is ILT. So that takes care of the mandatory ones, and here you will have to include few additional ones also. So in addition to these fields, remember the offering ILT offering when we created in UI, two other mandatory fields were offering start date and offering end date. These are not always mandatory for instructor-led offering. Here one of the offering we are creating is instructor-led, so include these fields also, and provide this only for the instructor-led type. Fine, so here you can have these two dates in the same date format that we discussed for the other date columns also we had earlier. And then one more such field you have to include for ILT offerings is this location detail. Fine, so here you can add this additional field, or you had a gap in these columns, so you can include this here also. That way you know the sequence of these columns from the third column is not relevant, you can have in any sequence. And then what is the value you provide in location number? For that you can refer the locations configuration, that is nothing but our classrooms config. So again, back to our learning admin landing page, and here let's go to the classrooms in resources. Fine, once these classrooms show, we can pick up one of this, let's say this particular classroom resource number, and provide it for this instructor-led training offering only. Fine, so this is how you can design the HDL file format first, deciding which field you want to use, and are there any better fields than the mandatory fields which may be helpful for you, and based on your functional business requirements, finalize what are all the other fields you may need in addition to the mandatory ones. And then do a test load. Once it works fine, you can explain the specification to the technical team. If it is a separate team who is transforming and extracting this data from your legacy system. And if your team itself is owning the transformation and extraction also, make sure you staff it or consider it in your implementation planning accordingly, because extraction transformation will take significant time. You have to factor it at least in your plan so that when you are ready to do it, you have sufficient time and also the required resources if it is a different person doing it, right? But if it is a responsibility of customer, if customer says I will provide it or I will get it done with whoever is providing my support to the production environment, then you'll have to explain the specification, and once they provide file in this format, you can test it by having a quick look. Also, when you load, you will get any errors if it is not in the required format. So once you prepare like this, you have to convert this to text format, because that format, as we discussed in the specification, you have to load it in that format. So whichever approach you prefer to convert, some people save it as CSV and then replace commas with pipe, because pipe is the default delimiter in HDL. You can change it if you want, but by default that is the one. Or you can write a formula here to concatenate all these different columns, delimiting with pipe. That is one approach. Or you can simply copy paste these different rows into a text file, and then whatever is the default delimiter you get, change it to pipe. So depending on your preference, volume and such things, you can use whichever you prefer. Because this is only a few rows here, we can as well copy paste it into a text file. Here, let's create this new text file. And name of this text file should be exactly as mandated in the specification that we saw. This course v3.dat as it prescribed. Fine. So here you can copy those rows that we got from Excel. And as you see, the delimiter it used is tab, but we should change it to pipe, which is the default delimiter for HDL. So for that, let's go to this replace option. Find that tab character and replace all those with pipe. Fine. And then it has did that for these blank lines also, remove those. And it has added additional pipes here, additional characters, because this offering has additional columns, but there should not be any blank columns in HDL. So remove all these additional ones that are there in the first object. Fine. And then you can have a quick look depending on whatever approach you follow for converting to text format. Sometimes there could be errors when date fields are converted, or even in number fields, there tend to be issues like there may be a leading space in some cases. So take care of all those glaring things at least, and then you can zip it and load. So here to zip it, the standard compressor you have in both Windows and Mac is okay. You don't have to use any separate software for that. And name of the zip file can be user friendly, like I said. So you can have your client initials for which cycle you are doing it, and also give a representation of for which object it is and which cycle, iteration 1, cycle 1 or so, and then upload that zip file. So to upload the file, go back to the data exchange landing page. Instead of view business objects, go to the next page to import and load data. Right, so here import the file, and you can select the file that is there in your laptop that we just created. That is in this learning folder. This is the zip file, right? Just a minute back we created and submitted. Fine. So here it will take a while to process it. So let's utilize the time for Q&A now. All right, so let's discuss each of these questions. Nikhil, thank you. Thanks for your acknowledgement. And next one, Mipali asking if the approvals are defined in AOR based and there are two representatives who satisfy assigning with the AOR, who gets the approval? Both of them will get it and one of them should claim it to approve it. And then next question, Nikhil asking currency other than USD, then send it to other admin or HRBP. That depends on the requirement, right? You have to ask the customer to whom to send it to. Yes, the sample requirements are what we are discussing now, but what is more important is to capture that additional requirements and let customer define for their business purposes who should approve it. Next question, Nag asking, is the REST API folder available for the participants? No, that folder is in my laptop, right, Nag? That folder is not available for others. But all the information in it you have already seen in the slide, right? All those APIs I have mentioned in the slide only. And when it is a attachment that you have to upload, I already showed that also how you can get the attachment. If it is online attachment, download from the sites like I mentioned in Lab Guide or any other site you know also. And if you want to create a PDF attachment, that is very simple. Create a dummy Word document and save it as PDF. You get the PDF file. Next question, Nag asking item number is nothing but content number. Yes. And next, how to load these COM files. Same way as I have shown the PDF file, instead of PDF, provide the COM file. But what is the differentiator in COM file case and also video files is also what I mentioned, right? The additional steps you have to do after that is uploaded. Next question, Nikhil asking, can we include activity also in the same dat file? Yes, activity also is an object within this course file. Next question, are we going to get all this content? We have only two files, presentation and lab guide. Yeah, I just addressed it, right, Nag? Within this particular PDF, the presentation, you already have all those REST APIs that I have used, right? This is just the same REST APIs I have copied for the demo also. And earlier I used to attach these additional files, but sometimes there used to be issues like some people not able to download the files. So I just tried to combine it within this same file. All right, thanks, Nag. Thanks for acknowledging that. So now let's see if this has progressed. Fine. So once you submit the file, it shows like this in dataset, the same file name as default, the same file name you have given. Content ID is what it generates when the file is uploaded to the server. And HDL does the processing in two different stages, import and load. Like majority of you said, you are aware of these things already. Once import is complete, then load will start. So load is going on now and import success is 100 and next two lines also represents the import status. Total lines is 4 as it says because it is considering only the merged lines, the detailed lines that are there in the file. These two merged lines and also these two merged lines. And then failed lines if any, and then the next three columns are from the load perspective. Load is still going on, that's why the success percentage has not reflected. And total objects, it says 2 objects only. Though there are 4 lines, the object it says is 2 because the lines will be grouped into objects. Like it happens in other modules also, same principle here. Right? So the grouping will happen at this course level. So it considers this course and also these two offerings as one object because both these are for the same course. And in this second course, it considers as the second object. And loading happens at a object level, which means if there is an error in any of the lines which represent the object, the entire object will not be loaded. So in this case, if there is any issue in these 3 yellow lines, none of the lines will be loaded because the entire object will be loaded, which means if there is any issue in offering, the course also will not be loaded. So to avoid such issues, one of the best practices you can follow is don't include courses and offerings within the same file, especially for new courses. Load all your courses first, and then you can load offerings next. So that way, when you give the course number here, this course number will already be existing in the instance. If there is any error in the offering will still error, but at least the course is already taken care. So you can minimize the dependencies that way. Fine. Now let's refresh this to see if it succeeded or any issues. Fine. So it went through fine. You can review the course and offering that got loaded in the same catalog page we have seen multiple times. And let's also try another load by causing some issue so that we can see the error management aspect also. So let's say this is the next course that we are loading, course 003, and we can remove this line. And here also, let's say this offering, we are loading for the same course. So we are changing this course number. And this is the third offering we are loading. So changing the offering number also. And let's say there is a typo in one of these lines like that. And let's same way zip it and load. I was hoping there will be some error or the other anyway, but because there is none, let's induce the error this way. Fine. So now let's upload this second zip file. This is the one we just created and submit it. And so once that completes, or once that shows the error, we can see that error. But prior to that, let's utilize the time for these other things we want to discuss. And now that you know, you have to use these two different approaches for different objects in Learning Cloud data migration, right? There will obviously be dependencies, which one first, which one next. The order that we followed is the relevant order. Take care of the content items first, because these content items you will have to link to the activity when you create the activity, right? But then one way in which you don't have to follow this exact sequence is by starting the course load before all the content upload steps are complete. So let's understand this, what is the different steps and sequence we followed and what can be changed here. So firstly, you created content ID using OLC REST API, right? Then you uploaded content file using Akamai REST API. And then for the required objects, you will have to update Learning Cloud to finalize it, to set it to ready for processing. This also using REST API. And then post processing for those two types of objects as we discussed, right? For this, you have batch processes. And after these are complete, your content files are totally ready. And then you can proceed with your course HDL file. Especially when this course file includes your self-paged activities, because in self-paged activities is where you have to link the content. Right? But how can you make this sequence a little more efficient, especially to utilize your cutover timeline more efficiently, because that may be very limited time in some cases. Once you load this content in OLC Cloud, and while you are uploading this content files in Akamai system, without waiting for uploading all the files, you can still proceed with loading your self-paged activities also. Because in self-paged activities, when you have to link the content, you just need the content ID or content number that you have in the output of the first step. So even when these other steps are not complete, you can still proceed with loading the courses. Because you should try loading courses as early as possible, because once the courses are loaded, there are more configurations you have to do, right? And even assigning, managing the access, or those are further steps that will happen. So to have time for all those steps, try to load the courses as early as possible by following this approach. And then updating Learning Cloud to finalize it. You can do it much later whenever you are ready to do the batch processes for completing the post processing of those content files. Right? And this step of updating those learning items to set it to ready for processing, you can do it in batches. So that batch process will pick up only those that are ready at that time, and then you can update the next set, and then the next batch process will pick up only the required ones. Right? So these you can time accordingly, depending on when the activity in the instance is less, considering all the other activities modules going on at that time. And then when it comes to loading, not so many hundreds of items, but maybe just few of the items, if you still want to leverage the REST API packages and so on, if you want to follow the sequential approach, that is also fine. Maybe for incremental changes that you may do, for enhancements that may happen after go live, for any new items that you load after that. And dependencies will be there even with your core HR, that all of you will know. No need to discuss that separately, right? Because you had to provide details like person number here. All those person numbers should obviously be there correctly in your core HR. And then, like I already mentioned, if you are using this bulk load approach, more important it is to ensure you plan how you want to automate. Because automating using some other programming language is outside HCM skill set. If some of you already know that, you can very well do that. Otherwise, you will have to have a resource at that point of time ready to help you automating these REST APIs. So whatever approach you use to automate it, middleware, C, Java, C++, and so on, that is up to you, whichever you or your resources are comfortable with, or whichever skill set you or your resources have readily available. If you want to use that, that is also fine. All right, so that's the important things to take care of in this overall process, and some best practices how you can utilize your cutover time more efficiently. Now let's see how this data load, the second try that we did, is going on. Fine. So as expected, you have an import error because there was an error in the header of one of the metadata lines, right? To understand those details. So as it says, this line cannot be processed because this particular attribute is unknown for this particular version. So it is pointing the exact attribute which is unknown. So you know there is an issue in this offering number that you have to correct. All right, so that's all the use cases we plan to cover in this workshop. And you can continue to go through these readiness documentation and additional documentation, whichever you want to explore in more detail, right? And you can continue tracking this learning cloud space. Like I said, so many enhancements, the fundamental items being revamped. In 26A, we already have one of these new items also available. And sometime next year, hopefully all this transition will be done and all of us will be using the new items only. All right, so before closing workshop, let's have one round of quiz with few questions. And while you take these quiz questions, I can also utilize the time to see if any questions in Q&A for which I can type responses, or if anything requiring explanation, we can discuss those also. So I will launch one each question in Zoom poll. We'll wait approximately a minute on each of these questions. I'll let you go through the question and options at your pace. After a minute, we will see the results and right answer. So I just launched the first question. Hopefully all of you able to view it. All right, everyone. Now the response is almost coming through. So let's see the results. Ideally, all of you should have got this right, though majority of you have, but this is the probably simplest of all the questions. This is the same sequence that we followed. The first option is correct. We started with content first and then course, offering, and finally the specialization. So those of you who chose the last option, at least the last option is the easiest one to exclude, right? Because specialization is where you have to add the course. So definitely you should have the course prior to creating specialization. And then next question, this is related to rating the learning item. All right, time up for this question. The right answer here is the second option. Learner does not has active, completed, or withdrawn assignment of the learning item. So some of these which we may not have explicitly discussed in the workshop, this way you will understand that you will still have to learn before attempting the certification exam. And this is also an indication where you need to practice further or go through the existing other documentation also that I mentioned. And then this next question is related to communities functionality. All right. So for this particular scenario, when the privacy setting is changed, both these things will happen. So the third option, all of the above is right. Everyone can view the community catalog and any pending request will be approved as well. So the third option is correct. And then next question, this is related to prerequisites functionality. All right, friends, time up for this. Here, the correct option is the second one. Prerequisites are applicable for course and specialization only. They are not applicable for the offerings. That profile option, the first option which says the profile option, not really a valid one. And then the third option says about batch process required for that integration. We did not discuss any such batch process, right? So that is also not right. And one last look at the questions in Q&A. I just typed answers to few quick ones, few short answers. And one question is pending. Let's discuss this in detail before we go ahead with the next quiz question. So Sushant is asking for learning incident. Is it possible to configure the system in such a way that after the incident is approved, the learner is not withdrawn and the content continues to appear in the catalog, or is that the system design that cannot be modified? All right. So the system design is based on what is that learning content for which the incident is being reported. If it is a employee created content, then they will be withdrawn from it. If it is admin created content, then the approver can talk to a learning administrator, and then learning administrator will be able to decide what to do with that. Maybe change the content or remove. That flexibility is there. All right, and these scenarios are explained in the different guides I have shown also. So there also you can continue to go through if required in detail. And then next question, this is also related to prerequisites functionality. Just about to end, but responses again started coming. So let's wait for a few more seconds. All right, so the third option is correct here. Prerequisites of both course and specialization will be applied. So application will consider whatever prerequisite is there for specialization, whatever is there for the course also. It's not that having one means the other one should not have the prerequisite. That is not the scenario. And then next question, this is related to capacity rules we discussed in the waitlist use case today. Or this was yesterday's discussion, right? Capacity rules. Good that majority of you got this right. The second option is correct. They are applicable only for the offering. What you set at a course level, they are just the defaults that will be defaulted to the offering. But the tracking of it, how many seats are booked and from when the waitlist will start, that is based on the settings you configure in the offering, like we discussed yesterday, right? When you created offering, the defaults got defaulted. You could change for every offering. And booked seats, you saw only for the offering. Next question, this is related to advanced rules that you saw during the assignment creation process. I'm up for this question. So here of these different possible options, why learning admin doesn't see those different rules, that will be possible when they are creating a required offering assignment. So the third option is correct. If they are creating required course assignment, it will show those advanced rules. That was what I demoed yesterday. When I created required course assignment, all those advanced rules showed that we discussed. All right, and meanwhile, few more questions in Q&A. Like I said, any more questions, please feel free to post in our community as the workshop is almost over now. Let me address these two questions, but after that, please leverage the community forum that is there. You can continue to have discussions there even when workshop is not live for rest of this week also. So Pala Saujanya asking, we have a requirement to integrate Coursera into OLC through API. We are planning to use Postman. Is there any other way to integrate? See, other way is using the external provider that I mentioned, right? But whatever reason, if that doesn't work, then yeah, you can utilize the Postman approach also. That is also fine. So first see whether the delivered integration or the out of the box integration helps. If it doesn't, then depends on the reason why it doesn't work. Then you can choose the alternate approaches using APIs. Which tool you use, like that Postman and all, that is one part. But whichever tool you use, it is still through REST API only anyway. All right, and here goes the second question. Next question. This is related to assessments functionality. Good. Almost all of you got it right, except for a handful. So good that you are following all these fine. The second option is correct. It is not added as a catalog resource. So the first option, not really. Learning admin is using as middle activity. That is not the case. I mean, it will typically be used as first activity or last activity to test the learners at the beginning of training as pre-assessment and at the ending also as post-assessment. But from a product feature standpoint, it can be used anywhere in the sequence of the different activities. Next question related to the different configurations that are possible, and when multiple configurations are done, how does the system handle it? So questions like these also, like I mentioned, when you go through the different guides, implementation guide, user guide, you will be able to find all this information as well. So no need to worry if something was not explicitly mentioned or if you missed something also. When you practice, when you go through further documents, you will understand all this. The first option is correct. It will evaluate approvals first, then capacity rules, and finally the prerequisites. Three more questions. After this one I am launching, we will have two more and then we will close workshop, hopefully on time. Some of you chose just one choice already. Please note this is a multiple right answer question. So multiple options are correct for this. Three options are right for this. Use the learn migration process. And second option also is correct. Grant the required privileges. And also the fourth option. Ensure to set that profile option. So only the third one is wrong. So all offerings have multiple activities. That is not really required. Though this feature helps when there are multiple activities, it is not that every offering must have multiple activities. Even after you enable this, there can be some offerings which have a single activity also. And then next question, this is related to the role, which role you would choose for this particular functionality. All right. So here it is easy to rule out the first option. At least it's not a self-service functionality. So employee you can rule out that way. And of the other three roles, learning specialist is the only other seeded role that is available. So that way also you can firm up that second option is correct. And then moving on to the last question. Again, good that majority of you got this right. Activity sequencing gives all this functionality, like I explained on Monday when we were discussing the offerings and specializations related functionality, right? So as part of that activity sequencing is where you have all those functionality related to advanced rules of display rules, completion rules, and is it dependent on prior activity or prior section? The third option is correct here, activity sequencing. All right, everyone. Thank you so much so far for attending this workshop. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for all your questions also in making this interactive. So like I said, any more questions, feel free to post in the community forum. We can continue to have these discussions. Though we are ending the workshop now, it doesn't mean our discussions will end. We can continue to discuss there. Any further questions while you practice or while you implement for your customers. All right. And if nothing else, yeah, let's close the workshop then. Thank you again. And if you attend any more workshops, we'll hopefully speak to you in those. Yeah, Nagendra and all, thank you for your comments. Please do fill the survey form also that shows for you in the same place where you registered for the workshops. In the same event page, you will find it. All right. So if nothing else, let's close. And thanks all again, everyone. Bye.